why not consider creating something instead that can actually be a real business where you don't have to do all the work? Because the other thing with the side hustle is many times that person is doing all the work themselves, right? Like they are the business. And so to me, that creates a little bit of a dependency on you that, if you're unable to do the work or you want to take a time off or, for any other reason that you don't see yourself like really in there hustling, you're tired after the day of full-time work, you want to do something else, like now you stop making money. And so that defeats the whole purpose.
You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. I've spent the last 4 years trying to discover how to break the burnout cycle, and as a high achiever in a fast-paced world, I know how easy it is to slip back into old habits, leaving you feeling overwhelmed and left behind. If you're anything like me, then you need to hear this. Burning out is not your fault. Yes, you can recover from burnout. And the post-burnout growth is not only real, but it feels amazing. This podcast is dedicated to helping break the stigma around mental health in the workplace, ending burnout culture for good, and the action steps that you can take today towards your personal growth and success. So let's do it. When I started Give Yourself Some Leeway, I was told that I had some serious notions doing this podcast. When I started talking about my mental health on social media, I was told that I was committing career suicide, that I would be much better off if I just kept my mouth shut, laid low, and spent the next 40 years in a corporate job and I would be set for life. Today, I'm joined by Jason Wojo, CEO of Life in There. And today we talk about how you can build your own vision for the future, define what winning means for you, and how to build a successful, sustainable business without compromising on your lifestyle. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you get just as much value from this conversation with Jason as I did. Jason, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway, and thank you so much for taking the time to join the show today.
I'm excited to be here, man. Looking forward to the conversation.
Jason, when it comes to Life in There, now people may not be familiar with Life in There. What got you started with Life in There, and who is it that you serve?
Yeah, man. So the first thing is to think about the word life in there as, everyone wants to be a millionaire. And that's great. And a millionaire has a lot of money. However, what we've seen over the years, and I had this early experience for myself, is like you'll see people with a lot of money, but they're unhappy or they're stressed out all the time or they're busy running around with their hair on fire constantly because they're always got something to do, right? And so I realized that the money in and of itself isn't enough to make someone happy and give them the life they want. And so this term life in here, which is actually coined by my partner, is the belief of like, hey, let's have a lot of life, right? So like a millionaire has a lot of money, a life has a lot of life, like, and I want you to have the money too, but it's a life first focused approach to business, so that and we help. Well, I am biased, but like I think we can add value to everyone, but the people in particular that we really resonate are the busy people who oftentimes are entrepreneurial. Maybe they're an investor, maybe they're a business owner, and they want to pave their own path towards freedom. Yet once they get into it, they actually find out like, wow, I'm actually more stressed, more busy, more worried than I was when I had a job, if they ever had a job, right? And so that's the kind of person we really try to help.
So when it comes to, let's say, finding that person, is it that there's a lot of people who are just stuck in work that they don't enjoy, and I think when it comes to, let's say, is it side hustle culture? I think is that what they dream of, having both worlds, and they think that side hustle culture is what will get them there.
So I think now, let me say this, like, so side hustles can be great. However, implicit in the term itself is the fact that you're going to be working hard, right? And so, and I'm not against working hard, but side hustles to me feel like something that should be a temporary effort on your behalf to maybe meet some financial goals where like, hey, I need to make a little money. I need to pay off some debt. I need to kind of like, move some things around and get my financial situation above water. But a side hustle to me, in any kind of sustainable way, if you're going to continue a side hustle for a long period of time, to me, if you have a full time job and you're doing a side hustle, you're probably going to end up working more than you want to. So why not consider creating something instead that can actually be a real business where you don't have to do all the work? Because the other thing with a side hustle is many times that person is doing all the work themselves, right? Like they are the business. And so to me, that creates a little bit of a dependency on you that, if you're unable to do the work or you want to take a time off or, for any other reason that you don't see yourself like really in there hustling, you're tired after the day of full time work, you want to do something else, like now you stop making money. And so that defeats the whole purpose. While I'm in a favor of side hustles in the short term, I'm not sure I'd recommend them for a long term strategy towards really providing financial freedom and security. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense because I feel that a lot of people get caught in that trap where they are in a job that is not aligned with them anymore, that they've grown in some way, or maybe they're tired of the work they do. They don't have the same energy as they had when they started that job. And next thing they see the shiny object, which is the side hustle. But instead of seeing it as a short term goal or a short term thing, or maybe it's something that they have an interest in that area. So they want to start a small business and then eventually leave the 9 to 5 that they're in now and go into that small business, but it never really gets off the ground. And they get stuck in that rut where they're like, I don't want to leave my 9 to 5 and ditch my salary or my pension or all these benefits to go into the side hustle or the side business that I have right now. But at the same time, they feel that it takes time for the business to get off the ground.
Yeah.
So they get stuck and it's like a catch 22 where they want to put more energy into that business because they know it won't get off the ground, but they are held back by this the security or the golden handcuffs of the career that does not drive them or they have no passion in.
Right. Well, and here's what I'll say, man, is like, and again, like it's cool in the short term. And many times a side hustle can lead to a business. But the problem that I see is even if somebody leaves their job and to pursue their side hustle full time, because they started it part time and because they likely haven't designed it to be independent of them, now they just replace one job for another job. And sometimes now that's also accompanied by a worse boss than you had previously, and that boss is you, because you're not going to give yourself time off and you're not going to stop thinking about work. And so I think the value in the side hustle is there, but you got to start thinking longer term if you do want to leave your job, that, how do I create something that doesn't rely on me 100%? And this is a mistake I think a lot of people make, because if you look at everything from the very early days of the educational system, this really just hit me the other day, actually. Um, we are reinforced and rewarded and encouraged, almost required, you could say, to do the work ourselves. Like, no one's going to take our math test in third grade for us. We're not encouraged to find people to help us. Like, so we are bred essentially for this like individualistic approach to getting things done. And that follows us through our job, and then also oftentimes in the business too. So we have this frame of how to accomplish things that actually ends up hurting us long term. Now, there's some great benefits to it. I love a hard work ethic and all that. But I think a higher level of understanding about business and tapping into the resources of other people and other systems and all kinds of things, like for like automation, like that's where you really start to see a business being created, the birth of something that goes beyond just your own labor and your effort, because we're a single person. And so you can, even if you work 20 hours a day, first of all, which of course isn't sustainable, when you can have other things, other people doing that work, you can multiply your efforts 5, 10, 100 fold when you do it correctly. But the other thing I want to mention that you said is like, I want to address this briefly, is like, people will stay at a job that they don't like, that sucks the life from them because of, and this happens all day. And I know you see this as well, man. Because they're afraid to leave, or because they want the health insurance, or because they have the 401k matching. Um, and to me, man, I really want to just encourage those people, like, think about this for a second. You're sacrificing 8+ hours every day of your life for the next 30, 40, 50 years to do something you don't even like. Can you imagine what that's doing to you as a person just for this perceived safety blanket, which by the way isn't even there because people get fired and laid off all the time, instead of pursuing what you really want to do. And so that to me like just pulls at my heart, man. I'm like, no, you can do it. And in fact, in Life and Air, we've had people that have gotten fired from their jobs. I'm like, yes, congratulations. They're like, what? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like now, this is your new birth. This is the beginning of something new for you. You've been thinking about it, doing it anyway. You've been preparing for it. You're ready for it, and now you just got pushed. You got pushed off the edge into the pool. And so, like, I just want to encourage people that if you're not there yet, like something amazing is on the other side to consider.
Yeah, like that was something that rings so true to me because in my last job, I got to a point where I was like almost in that position for 10 years. And it just didn't sit with me anymore. I knew that I had grown as a person. It wasn't anything against the work that I was doing. I loved the work that I was doing, but I knew that I couldn't grow. And if I continued in the same position, I would stay in that same role for the next 20 years if I chose to, and there would be no
Mm.
growth there. But I knew that as a person, I needed to grow and develop.
Right,
So I
right,
I I knew it was up to me. It was my responsibility. If I wanted to stay there, I could put up with it and stay at that same level for the next 20, 30 years. Or I could
right.
take my own responsibility and say, no, I want to see what else is out there. Yes, it's a big risk. I had to sell my car to pay the bills. And that was something that people didn't think I would do. But when I did it, when I handed in my notice, a lot of people came to me and said, "Oh, I wish I could do what you just did. Oh, I wish I had the freedom and the control to just up and leave just like that." And I'm like, and of course you do.
You
It,
do,
it, you,
right,
everyone has that. It's like, yes, there's a sacrifice. Yes, it does take, there's a bit of a risk in it, but you don't know what opportunity is out there if you don't look. And I
that's
just
right.
put myself in that position where I had to look for that new opportunity. I put in my 4 weeks notice, and then I was like, right now it's tangible. It's a real thing. I am leaving, and I didn't have anything lined up at the time, but I knew I was like, okay, I'm putting myself in a position to find out what else is out there. And now it's almost a year later, and I found like my new career has brought me from Ireland to Switzerland, and something that I never would have even thought of 12 months
Mm,
ago. It's just a
it's wild.
crazy change, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's something that wouldn't have even have crossed my didn't wasn't even on the horizon for me 12 months ago, but it was something that I had just put myself out there and just embraced change, growth, whatever life's going to throw at me. And I think that is the hardest obstacle for a lot of people is when they get out of that comfort zone to get over that first hurdle,
yeah,
and it's just putting yourself out there, and they're like, oh, but this is all I've known for the past 10, 15, 20 years. How do I leave that position,
right,
or how do I
right.
get out of that mindset?
So you, man, you said a few things there that are really important. I want to make sure everybody caught. Like, so one thing that you may want, and let's talk to somebody right now that you're thinking about leaving your job. And by the way, if you love your job, you're happy, this is your life dream, like go for it, keep it, sure, whatever. But if you're not, like, number one, you may have to look at one of the things that I see people that keeps people in their job is like they've created kind of a golden handcuff situation with their finances, and like maybe they made good. And by the way, people that make good money at their jobs also have a harder time leaving. They're like, man, I'm making 150, 200 grand a year. Like, how am I going to make that otherwise? And now they have like the Lexuses and the nice house and the bills that go along with it. And so there may be a downsizing, a downgrading that has to temporarily occur while you get your business off the ground. And so that's not easy for people, right? Like, what are people going to think? Oh my gosh, like, and we've had those people come to us and have told us that the most important thing they could ever do is get out of their jobs so they can spend time with their kids, for instance. And then we're like, okay, well, listen, you got to get rid of that, $900 car payment on the Mercedes. And they're like, no, I could never do that. What? Like, it's we had one woman who said, oh, well, I got that car because it's the safest one in the market. We got online. I'm like, no, actually, in that year, it was actually like the Honda, like I think Pilot was the safest rated car. And she's like, well, I could never do that because she wanted the toys, right? And she was lying to herself. And so that's one thing is you might have to downgrade lifestyle. The other thing I think to consider is it doesn't have to be a cold turkey jump. So, for instance, when I got out of my first job, actually, it was my first job and my only real job after all my education. Um, I wanted to go into real estate, and so I flipped 3 houses to prove to myself that I could do it because I'm like, I did my first one, and by the way, my first flip I make like half my year's salary, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but what if it was beginner's luck? What if this is a fluke? What if? So I do another one. I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting a little hang of it. I have a little more confidence, but I still don't know if I'm ready to replace a full time income. Did a third one. I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like, and I was able to quit. And so, your earlier point of a side hustle, let's say that your side hustle is in the genre or the industry of the business you want to actually create, and you should ideally have that because there's there's a tremendous amount of safety that is provided by a steady paycheck that allows you to learn while you're still getting paid. And so pick a side hustle, for instance, that is representative of eventually the business you'd want to get into. Hone your chops, learn, get some experience under your belt, and then when you do take that jump, maybe you'll feel a little more confident. Do things like set deadlines for yourself. Or we had one couple come to us. He was going to quit his job, a well-paying job. And he's like, I'm ready to quit right now. And his wife is like, no, you're not. We have like kids, like we have family. We're not going to go live in a cardboard box. And so for them, they wanted to accomplish, they're like, okay, well, what would make us safe his name was Andy, leaving his job. Well, they want 2 new cars. They didn't have to be brand new cars, but new to them. They wanted the house paid off. They wanted a year's worth of health insurance and a year's worth of expenses in the bank. And it took them 11 months to do all that. But now they could leave checking off those boxes one at a time with the confidence that like we can make this happen. Like we really can do it. And then by the way, to your earlier point as well, like, once you're in that position, if you're making decent money with a side hustle or doing something else, and you're only focusing on it a couple hours a week, and now you're out of your job and you have all that extra availability to make that successful, like think about how much more successful you'll be because now you have that time to devote to the new business, right? And so that's something people miss as well. And so like you can really amplify your results once you're able to exclusively focus on that in a really kind of concrete way.
We covered so much there. So it's like, but
I
yeah,
know,
that's
man. Sorry, I just like
that.
totally vomited all over like the yeah.
Yeah, but again, that was just how I felt at the time was a lot of people said, "Oh, you can't do this. You can't do this. You've
Mm,
worked so many years building up this to get to here to get." It's like this is a job. This will set you for life.
yeah.
There's so many people. I remember there was a service awards uh, celebration at work. And they were celebrating people who had been there for 15, 20, 30, all the way up to 45 years in the company. And I was sitting there and while like we were clapping and applauding everyone, and I was just sitting there and looking at them, they're all cutting the cake. It was just one big cake for all the people who served between 15 and 45 plus years. And I was sitting there being like, that's not going to be me. And
Oh
I said
man.
it, I said it out loud, and everyone started like laughing at me. And next thing, one guy just turned around and he was like, "I think Eugene's trying to say something," but they
uh,
just didn't expect it. They didn't expect it to come out of me, and I didn't expect
right.
it out of me. I didn't expect to say it out loud. And but it
Did
was
I say that
just,
out
I think,
loud?
that moment of realization that I
Man,
was like, okay, something isn't sitting right here. And it wasn't that I didn't have anything wrong against the work that I was doing or against my team, but I just knew I was in a different place now,
right.
and the way I was expending my energy wasn't um, on the same level as it was 10 years ago, and I had to acknowledge that. And that was part of the reason why I burnt out 4 years ago, was because I was expending energy into other activities outside of work because it wasn't aligned. I wasn't fully aligned with the work that I was doing, that I was expending into other areas of my life and trying to get that extra achievement and fulfillment from different areas. And eventually, on top of other things, responsibilities and stress and trauma, that it all just compiled and overwhelmed me. And I just snapped. I just hit rock bottom, started hyperventilating. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was at one day in work and I just thought I was having a heart attack. And I was like, Eugene, you're 27 years old. This can't be a heart attack, can it? And I couldn't catch my breath. Just had finally came to my senses, and I was like, okay, I'm getting checked out. And I just rang my manager and said, I'm leaving. I get someone to cover me. I have to check this out. This is not normal. And my doctor prescribed me with 4 weeks off work. And as soon as she said that, I was like, I can't do that. I've never done that. And that was the moment of realization. Hindsight is 2020. That was something that didn't seem normal to me to take that much time off work because I was constantly going, and it was like a fear that if I stay out of work for 4 weeks and people think that it's because of my mental health, even though it was because of my mental health, I was like, is that putting my career at risk? And that
Mm,
was the taboo around the subject of mental health in the workplace, that if you were ever to take leave because of your mental health, that would affect your any chance of promotion or any chance of development in your career. And I think that sits a lot with people as well, that there's that fear that if they leave that secure job, that people will wonder why, and they'll jump to conclusions as to, oh, why would he leave that position? There must have
yeah,
been something wrong, or something must have come up. There must have been some event that they would leave such a secure job to move to anything else. And
right.
it's just the taboo around those topics that and people don't like to talk about out loud, and people just kind of keep it all to themselves, that they put themselves in boxes and never address that. And I'm sure that's something you're very familiar with life in air.
Man, you said a lot there. And so, like, we do see that a lot. And we even see the same exact thing, for instance, with people that we help build businesses. And even among the business community, people are looking at them like, well, hold on a second. Why aren't you're not working 60 hours a week? Why? Like, what's wrong? What's going on here? What's wrong with you? And so, starting from a young age and from those early experiences, when you have a job or whatever, I think there's a it's a different way of thinking where, people in their own minds will think that, for instance, a job is a safest, most secure thing to do, and it's what everybody does. And by the way, that's what I was taught. Like, I was taught you get a good education and you get a good job, and that's kind of like life, right? And you get some couple of kids along the way, and you pay off your house someday, and like that's it. And it's a different level of awareness and a different level of kind of, I think, authenticity with yourself, like, and asking yourself, like, is this really all there is? That within a few weeks of my very first job. So listen, I went to school for 15 years. I have two bachelors, I have a master's, I have a PhD, all in preparation to give myself the highest chances of probability for getting a great job. I'm in that very first job out of my PhD, and I realized within weeks, like, this isn't for me. And again, similar to you, I didn't have any problem with the people, wasn't even the work. It was just that for me, it was somebody else having that much control over my life, both financially and what I did with my time, that drove me nuts. And I'm like, I don't, no one's going to tell me when to work, how much I can make, who I'm going to work with, what I'm going to work on. Like that, just for me, felt very, disresident. And so that was what drove me out of it. But meanwhile, I'm looking around to other people. And by the way, I was working, most of these people were government employees, and it was very safe, very secure. And I'm looking around, and these people seem to be, I mean, I wouldn't say they were happy. Some of them were, but they're kind of just getting by, doing their thing. They're in their groove, they're in their rhythm. And I'm like, it's just not me. And so I know people looked at me strange when I said I was going into real estate investing. And I've even had family members be like, "You have a PhD from Duke, and you're gonna go flip houses? What?" I also had a health and fitness, like a training business as well. They're like, "You're doing what?" Like, and so it's just people's own perceptions of that you listen. You have to get past that, and I think it doesn't ever go away. I think there's always a little bit of that there, but you got to get through that as quickly as possible. Number one, and number two, you got to get around people that see the things the way you see it. Like, get around people that are the mavericks, the entrepreneurs who are living that kind of lifestyle, because they're the ones who can relate to you and encourage you and like, give you something to shoot for, versus these other people who are telling you you're crazy, you're gonna fail. Like, what are you doing? This is so stupid. Like, that's probably not the right group of people to be hanging out with and getting input from. You know, and so that's why you don't take business advice from people that are broke, right? And so, like, uh that's something that the entrepreneur has to prepare themselves for, especially if they're coming now. If they're born entrepreneurs, meaning like their whole family's entrepreneurial, they're exposed to it from a young age. That was the only way to do it. Maybe you don't have this same challenge, but certainly for everyone who comes through a W-2 kind of perspective and goes that journey, that route, then this is probably something you're gonna have to face.
Yeah, I think that's part of the hardest part. A lot of people, especially back in Ireland, are caught in this bubble. And it's because they don't have the mentors or they don't have um, that network or environment to really grow beyond that. That they stick with their bubble and they call it their community, and they'd say, "Oh, I'd never leave this. Like this is who I am. This is all I'll ever be." And even though they know that they're not being treated right, or they know that they're so expended and exhausted that they say, "No, this is who I've always been. This is how I'll always be, and there's nothing that can change that." And it's kind of I can't I know there's a term for it. It's kind of, it's like a learned helplessness
Mm.
where they've just accepted that yes, I could change, but it's going to be at such a cost or such a discomfort to me that I don't think I that it's not worth the time, or I'm going to fail, or I'll fail at it anyway, and they have that negative self narrative that always holds them back.
So true, man. And I think that's where like a lot of this stems from like how you are viewed. Now listen, again, with the caveat that some people really are just kind of happy with, and they're happy with whatever they do. That's great. But I feel like a lot of people have this little voice inside them that is saying like, hey, you were meant for more. Hey, you're capable of more. Or and they choose to kind of keep pushing it down because it's too uncomfortable to acknowledge that, because then it could mean actually failing if you actually try it versus the safety that I have in my job and I don't have to work that hard and I get a paycheck. And then there's the other kind of people who maybe have been so beat down with people telling them they can't do things that they just kind of accept it, right? And they've kind of just like they've lost the fight, and that's really saddening to me. And we that's at that person you have to meet them at the level of oftentimes like helping them remember what their dreams were before they became an adult, this thing called adulting, right, where like you look at the evolution of us as we age, and we go from these curious, fun, loving, exciting, focused, individuals that are focused on like really like seizing the moment, being present, enjoying ourselves, to all of a sudden like it's all about like paying the bills, like and just fitting in and doing what everybody else is doing, even if they're headed off a cliff, right? And so there's a lot to unpack there, but I think I think everybody is capable of incredible things. And certainly we're all a little bit different in our skills and our abilities, but there's certainly, I think, more for everyone that currently more than what they're currently experiencing. I think if they really kind of like are honest with themselves.
Yeah, I think it was something definitely since the pandemic that people just got more of an awareness of uh because they were boxed in for so long. They were like, no, I don't have to stay in this job. I don't have to. There
Yeah.
are other options out there. I think that was the tipping point for a lot of people that just kind of clicked and said, no, I can do more here. Or they finally got their freedom again. They were like, I don't have to stay within this box. I can go anywhere I want. And but then there were other people who I met on the other side of it that were so crushed by everything that happened that
Mhm.
they had both the learned helplessness, but they also had all the social anxiety and all the overwhelm that came with it, and they were so drained from everything that had happened. They were told to go back to accept this new normal and pretend as if nothing ever happened, and they put themselves in this box where they're watching people around them start their own businesses, watching people move on to other starting new careers, and they're sitting there being like, I know I'm worth more, but I don't want to make the effort right now. I'd rather go down with this sinking ship or watch everything burn around me or fall around me or crumble. And they'll sit there, wait till it's until everything crumbles, and then it will be painful enough for me to move on. And I just find it breaks my heart because there's so many people um that in my circles before that I reached out and I said, look, I was like, I'm doing it, and you should at least pursue this or look at it as an option because sitting on a sinking ship, you're watching the world fall apart all around you, and you're 100% aware of it, and they're using different things to distract themselves, even though they are aware of it happening. And that was just something that didn't sit well with me. I was like, how someone can let themselves get to a state where they're aware they are worth so much more, but they would rather sit there and watch the ship sink rather than take the responsibility themselves to prove their own self-worth.
I know, man. That's super sad. And we within our program, for instance, we have mastermind and coaching. And one of the things I'll tell my coaches is like, listen, guys, you can't want your students' success more than they do. And I've seen the coaches, for instance, the mentors that know this person has potential, know that incredible things are possible, and yet they don't do it. Like they just for whatever reason. And like, and you can work through all the mindset issues you want, but if at the end of the day, sometimes they just they don't want it bad enough. Um, and that's another reason. So really kind of getting out of your own way, I think is part of this. And like, and that's why like when we celebrate someone getting fired, now you're standing on the edge of the high dive and you're pushed in. Now, okay, now you're in. You're like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And so sometimes I'll tell you, man, sometimes people need that they have to hit rock bottom before they're ready to dive out, or to climb back up. And so yeah, that's unfortunate. I think when that happens because you could really be so much further along. But like I've seen the exact same thing you're talking about.
And it's funny when it comes to rock bottom. Rock bottom is different for so many people. I've seen people where I thought they hit rock bottom, but they're like, oh, that happened, and they sit there and they let it happen again, and it gets worse every time. They go to the basement of rock bottom,
Yeah,
and I'm like, at what level of discomfort or pain is it going to take for them to learn? Or did they just keep on accepting rock bottom after rock bottom? And it's just a vicious cycle. And I've done so much trying to help people to break that cycle. And sometimes you bring it to their awareness and they were like, oh yes, I'll get to it in time. I'm just really busy right now. And now I'm really overwhelmed because that rock bottom moment happened. And for me, that would be wake up call. But for them, it's like, oh, it's just life throwing more lemons at me. And they just move on. They just go back to living on autopilot. And it's trying to help them break that cycle.
yeah, dude. But look at these people. I was reminded of this recently when we're passing some show where my wife and I were looking for a new movie to watch, and we passed something about like I can't remember it's like my 600-pound life or something like that. And it's showing one of these people that literally can't even get out of bed. They need a crane. And meanwhile, the mother who they still live with is stuffing their face with Oreos and McDonald's. And they're like, well, Johnny's not Johnny gets mad at me if I don't give him his food. I'm like, hello, you're killing your kid. Like, do you not realize like all the doors in the house have had to been sawed off and made twice as wide? He needs a crane. He's gotten sores all over himself. He has every health issue under the book. And by the way, and he's not taking action either. But then you have someone who's enabling him too, and it's like, oh my gosh, like it just man, it rips me up. Like what? Like didn't somebody not confront this person, or did they not see that when they were 300 pounds? Because it does get harder. Like it gets harder. It doesn't get easier. Like if you have a hard time getting to the gym when you feel like you're 20 pounds overweight, just wait till you're 100 pounds overweight. It's harder. It gets more difficult. You think it's hard to get your business going when you have 5 grand of debt and well, just wait till that turns into 50 grand or 500 grand. And it gets harder and harder. So to your point, like the quicker you can do this, like the better off you'll be. But not everybody takes that step, man. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's again, it's that hurdle. I think some people learn from their mistakes when they make the small mistakes. They make the $100, the 5 grand, or the 10 grand mistake, and some of them just quit. Then they were like, "Oh, it's like that was too much of a loss for me. I'll never try again. I'll go back to what I know, or what was comfortable before." Rather than learning from that mistake and progressing from there, and then
Yeah.
finally getting their win. But I think that comes back to, what does people have a very different definition of what success means, or what winning means for them. Uh, and a lot of the time, people think that success means they need to be uh, financial freedom, or they need to earn their millions before they're successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, everybody's definition is different. So like in Life and Air, for instance, we help people craft what we call a vision, which is really like give it, let's say money was no longer a concern. Like what would your life look like? Like I'm talking about in a very tangible, concrete way in every part, like relationships, your health, your spiritual life. Is that important to you? All these different factors, your business, your schedule, how are you spending your time? Like, those kinds of things. And one of the challenges I see, and this is also, reflects back on a conversation about leaving your job, is like sometimes people, at least on first sight, consider the accumulation of material items as being the equivalent of success. However, many times that same success materially isn't accompanied by a sense of peace or fulfillment or meaning or purpose, or they're estranged from their kids or their spouse because they're working all the time, and so they forgot to put in the calendar issue and having control of their time. And so and there's nothing wrong with nice things at all, but I'm not sure, to me that feels like you're describing to me your balance sheet. And I'll ask somebody like, what is success to you? They're like, oh, well, a house that's paid for, a few weeks paid vacation, and maybe a few new cars, not a lot of debt. And I'm like, again, that's your financial life. What do you want your life to look like? And so the challenge here is that I think it boils down to this: having an internal frame of reference versus an external. So an external frame of reference is like, hey, I'm going to define my success based on some parameter that I'm going to choose in comparison to other people. And because the easiest way to do that is by stuff like who drives a nicer car, who has a bigger house, that's what people choose, because you don't really know what people's relationships look like behind closed doors unless you're close with them. On the surface, you can see what they own. Now, of course, it could be a lie too, because they could be financed to the gills and in debt. But we don't know that, right? And so we just take it for face value, and so that's one easy way to play that game. And that's that's I feel like a losing game, because comparison isn't a game you can win, because even if you win it, you just expand your pond a little bit, and now you get people that are, you know, wealthier than you, or smarter than you, or in better shape than you, or better looking. Like it's a you can't win that game. Um, and so I think a better way, a more intrinsic way and sustainable way to define success is for you to choose for yourself what you want. And regardless of what other people think, and regardless of what, maybe you were told you should want or what success looks like, pick it for yourself. Like, so for one person, being success could be, being the best parent. For somebody else, it could be, giving away the most, right? Or for somebody else, it could be like being the best husband or wife, or like or impacting the most lives, or making a difference in the world. And so I think there's a deliberate intentionality that has to come with this, because by nature we are essentially, I don't want, and by the way, I'm personally not a conspiracy theorist. However, we have been conditioned just by the way humans learn to compare ourselves to others, but I don't think that's going to lead to what you want. And I've seen many, many, many wealthy people cross that finish line where they never have to work another day in their life, and they are miserable. They don't know what to do. They have alienated their friends, their family. They don't have any hobbies, because all they did was work hard to get there and define success by other people's standards. And so this is something that you need to take the time to really figure out for yourself. You can't just, this is something you can't just delegate to somebody else, or use somebody else's definition.
Yeah, I love how you bring that to light, because it was that level of sacrifice that they were chasing success. And I've seen that time and time again, where it's this nonstop sacrifice. They're like, and I see this a lot in the toxic side of the hustle culture, where they're saying, no, if you devote the next 5 to 10 years of your life and just focus in on this hustle or focus in on this one thing, then you'll get all the success you want. But they completely isolate themselves from every other aspect of their life. They completely focus on the wealth, and they cut out all they cut out their health, they cut out their relationships, they cut out their spirituality, everything else. That if they took that into consideration when they started building on the business, and they had their values, and they had some form of community and spirituality and service, and um, focusing on building their relationships and their social life as well, that instead of cutting them out, that they set a boundary, and they said, I'm going to set a boundary on who I let into my life, or the values that I hold dear to me. I'm going to bring people into my life who hold similar values, or at least have some form of, let's say, similarity or complement to that. Uh, but I have come across time and time again people who have just cut themselves off from the world because they have just laser focused in on that one goal. And next thing they reach it, and they're just like, what now? And they're
Right.
like, yes, I have the money, I have 6 and 7 figures, but what do I do? Do I get a Lambo like everyone else? Should I be
Yeah.
will I be happy then? And it's what are those moments that make you feel happy? It for me, one of the things, especially with Leeway, it's all about those small things in your life that you often take for granted, and they seem silly, they seem ridiculous, but they are the things that accumulate over time, that that really shape your life. And for me, one of my key like KPIs of success is when I unconsciously like find myself singing in the shower, because that's a moment of happiness. It's a moment of like idle thought and of creativity and playfulness, that if you're completely stressed out, you're not going to have the time to sing in the shower. But if you're in that state of mind where you're so relaxed that you're just singing naturally in the shower, and that's the only thing occupying your mind, then you're in a good place.
I love that. I love that, man.
So you mentioned there about your the what was it? I'm actually losing my train of thought now. We were talking about, again, when it comes to your business, working less, and
Yeah.
to build on your business success. Because I know a lot of people, when they, because we did mention this already, when they are working their 9 to 5 and they want to start their side hustle, or they want to start their own business, they want to leave the 9 to 5 and go into their own business. And oftentimes they leave the 9 to 5 and start working the 8 to 8 plus weekends. And then they find themselves, oh, I burnt out when I was working the 9 to 5. And next thing, they start their own business, they
Right.
follow their passion, and they burn out again, and they're like, what am I doing wrong with my life?
Yeah. Yeah, dude. That's the golden sauce right there, right? And so here so one of the things I think that the first thing, and let me just back step one moment. When you have a vision for your life, you have the template and the boundaries for what you want your business to look like. You have the guide as to how much time you have available in your business. You know how much money you need to make in your business. Like part of a complete vision is like, well, how much money do I need to live my vision? And so now that you have these parameters, you have the information required to fulfill that life. Now you turn to the business, right? And now you look at, okay, so how do I create a business that really sustains and supports my life instead of sacrifices it? And so that's where this mind shift needs to occur, as business isn't just a way to make money that I'm going to grind it out to do, and instead replace that with an idea of like, how do I create a business that I can run while still having the life I want? And so a few of the things that are so that's the very first thing. Like, and the vision helps with that a lot. So for instance, we have an event called the Get a Life Getaway, and one of the exercises we do is we have people say like, hey, listen, let's imagine, you just won the lottery and money's not a concern anymore. What would an average week look like for you? And we have a map out, like literally, what would you do? What would you do with all your time? And so once they do all that stuff, we'll have them calculate how much time all that takes and how much time they have left for other things. Now, in our example, those other things would be your business. And I can tell you that on average, somebody will be able to work 20 to 30 hours a week probably while still having the life they want. That's an average. I've seen numbers all over the place. But so now the question is like, okay, well, how do I create a business that I can work, 20, 30 hours a week in and still make the money I want? And so the next thing that we need to do is recognize that we as business owners during the early phases of the business are probably doing things, and there's a maturational process that businesses go through. In the early stages of a business, you're most likely as the founder doing all the work, or at least most of the work. You're doing things you're not good at, you shouldn't be doing. It is violating your vision, but you have to, and you're doing that to kind of learn the ropes. Now, with very rare exceptions, that's mostly what people experience. And so, most of us aren't doing a tech startup where we have angel investors and like and launches and GoFundMe campaigns. And so we do the work, but we have to, but this is really an extension of that side hustle that we talked about before. But we got to get out of that as quickly as possible. So the way we do that is to start the process of when we call this in Life and Air, a process we've developed called SEAD, SEAD. It stands for Strategic Elimination, Automation, and Delegation. The concept of elimination, automation, and delegation isn't new. This is just there's my twist on it and how I've seen it actually work out in real life. And so the first step in that is like you have to look at your business and say, hey, what are the things we really shouldn't even be doing? And that's one part of it. The strategic part of your business design comes from your life vision. That's why you want your life vision, because if you're going to create a business that's going to serve your life, you need to know what that life looks like. And then really where people need to start focusing is like, what can I automate in my business through software, tools, technologies, things like that? And then what can I delegate? And so this is where now we run into another roadblock, not so much with the automation, but delegation. Like, we have every excuse in the book why, like, nobody can do it as well as I can. It takes me longer to train somebody. Like, I've heard all of them, by the way. But until we get the things off our plate that are not contributing directly to the success of the business in a big way, we're going to struggle. We're going to be running around with our hair on fire. We're going to have, fires to put out constantly. And so you've got to really make that shift from the business owner to the business operator to the business owner position. Like, really, that's the way you need to think of it. I even think of, man, this struck me, you think of, you got a football player, an NFL team, right? You got the players in the field. They're the ones in the trenches. Then you have the team coach who's kind of dictating the plays to call, except for some audibles, and they're kind of running the show. But then you have the team owner. The team owner is not involved in the day-to-day of the team. They might be involved in some of the selection of like the coaching staff to some extent, but like it's an evolution of that, being in the trenches to kind of being above the forest, that the business owner similarly needs to progress along this path if they're going to have that time freedom that they're looking for. And I also want to say, like, listen, some people love being the person who swings a hammer and loves being the one in the trenches. And if that's you, then cool, keep doing it. But I just want you to understand, like, there are some dangers of that, namely of which, like, what happens if you can't work or you want to take time off? Like, now the business stops making money. And so that's a pivotal kind of change that we can talk more about that, but that's kind of the first few things that the business owner, the founder, usually needs to think of before they're able to create a true business that doesn't require them to pull all levers.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the when someone is not sacrificing anything and they're laser focused on building everything themselves in the business, that and they get to their 6 or 7 figures, they take a step back and everything starts to dwindle because they haven't trained anyone or they haven't automated anything. And they're like, I need to take this step back for their, let's say, their mental health or their physical health. And next thing they're like, oh no, wait, the business is falling apart. And they thought that, okay, if I devote the next 5 years of my life to this and I have an exit strategy, but the business falls apart without them. They actually haven't automated or built a system around the business for it to operate without them being there. And they realize that they cannot sell that business without them being a part of it. And I
Right.
think that I know a lot of people who put themselves into that rut where they were like, okay, I've built this. Now I put so much energy into it, and now I don't have that energy anymore. But they need to devote time and energy into training people to take over the business for them, and that does take time. I think there's like trying to find that happy medium, that sweet spot when it comes to delegating or taking on new team members, that either they start too early in the business or they start too late.
Right. Right. Well, so one thing like so so the seed process we eliminate first, then we automate, then we delegate. Automation comes before delegation many times because it's a whole lot cheaper and it adds a layer of stability to the business. So for instance, um, you get a software to do your new client onboarding or your prospecting or reaching out to you include some level of technology there that'll get done no matter what. You might spend a couple $100 a month, right, on some automation software. When you get to people, and automation is a skill set, you got to learn how to do that or have somebody else do it. But delegation is the most expensive and it is the hardest because you're dealing with people. And so the first recommendation I'll make for people typically is like find low level help, low skill level, required help that can at least start taking some of the things off your plate that like really like their admin stuff. Like no business owner should be keeping their own books, you know, I guess unless you're a bookkeeper. And no business owner should be doing some of the admin things that you could pay someone, a VA $10 or $5 or $20 an hour to do, because your input as the owner is so much more valuable and you're costing yourself a ton of money by keeping it on your plate, because you could be doing higher level things that are higher leverage in terms of producing more for the business than you're currently doing. Like, and this is where, for instance, I see business owners make a mistake when they're doing everything themselves. Balls start getting dropped, and those could be costly balls that now you don't have the ability to handle effectively, because you don't just have 3 balls, you have 40 balls to juggle. And and so this is where someone will say like, well, they can't do it as good as me. I'm like, yeah, right, but you're getting to it like 10% of the time right now. And so what's 100? Let's say you're 100%. You're the best at this. You're 100%. You're getting it to 10% of the time. Like a 10% times 100 is 10%, right? You're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, to take somebody who's let's say they're half as good as you, but they do it every single time. They are going to be better at it overall over the long haul because they're doing it, and they'll get better. And so like this is where like we think we're saving ourselves money by doing it ourselves. We're costing the business a ton of money, and we're actually the cause of a lot of business failure because we burn out, because we don't get to these things, because we are missing opportunities that we can't capitalize on because we're too busy. And so you got to really, I think delegation is hugely important thing. But and one of the let me just say one other thing here. A lot of people have a bad experience with delegation. They're like, oh, they didn't work well or it didn't work. And many times I want to just encourage that person. It's probably you. Like, and I say that with total love. But just because you're good at swinging a hammer doesn't mean you're good at running a contracting team. Just because you're great at baking brownies doesn't mean you can run a bakery. And so you have to develop your own skills as a business owner if you're going to take on this role, so that you can just like that technician role, the person doing the work has to learn that. You have to learn how to manage that person, how to hire that person, how to screen them, how to lead them, how to all these things excuse me, that you probably don't know how to do yet. So don't give up if you have one bad experience, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I find that a lot, especially people who find themselves in management positions because they have experience in a technical area. It's like, oh, you have 20 years
Right.
experience in a technical area, you should be the line manager. And next thing they're like, I have all the technical experience, but I don't know how to manage or lead a team.
Yeah.
And they just get put into that role to learn on the job. And next thing they're wondering why, oh, I'm failing in my new position given my 20 years experience. They don't have the technical, the managerial or the leadership skills in order to lead.
Yeah, it's different. Exactly right.
So for anyone who was, let's say, wants to uh again pursue their own business, uh as you said, when it comes to success, or when it comes to setting those boundaries so that they can prioritize their lifestyle as well as building their business. So they're not just laser focused on building the business. What steps would you uh, encourage them to take? Maybe before they start that business, or before they start that venture, or before they start that side hustle? What are things that you think they should take into consideration before they jump in or dip their toes in the water?
Yeah. So the first thing I would do, no matter what, is figure out like, and this sounds completely backwards to the question you're asking, but I would really figure out what you want your life to look like, because that vision will give you the check the stop or the go sign for pursuing the business. Like, so if you recognize, you create that vision and you realize your current life is really out of whack, it's out of alignment with that vision. Now you got to do something. Maybe the business is a tool to get you out of there. So you got, and the reason that's important too is because when you get into business, it is not all unicorns and rainbows, and you're gonna have challenges just like you had at work. They're just different. They're showing up in different ways, and so you need something to keep you going through those challenges and something to inspire and guide you in your decision making process. And so you create your vision, and then what I would do is I'd start to map out what you imagine this business looking like in terms of like, hey, what are we gonna do? Why am I gonna do it? What are my skills in? What am I good at? And what is the business going to require that I'm probably not good at or don't have the skills? And then that's probably the first lever that you want to pull in terms of like, hey, can I build some automation in here? Should I hire somebody for this? I also recognize fully that like early on in the business, there's probably not a lot of discretionary income. So it's like some people are afraid, like I can't afford somebody or whatever. Listen, you can hire someone for 5 or 10 hours a week to get some of those things off your plate, and that's a big dent for you as an individual. If you can cut 10 hours a week from your workload and give it to a VA who you're paying $10 an hour, or even like someone remote that you're paying 20 or $25 an hour, it's still way cheaper than you losing money by doing that in your business. And so one thing I want to consider, help people consider, is like, okay, here, what's the business? What does it look like? What are my skills? What am I not good at? How can I find those people? Where can I start developing the chops for the areas that I'm weak in that the business is going to need? So, one thing I think with business is like, you need to know how to, you need to know how to build the business, how to lead people, and how to sell. You really got to know how to sell too, because, this is something that you'll almost without exception, I see the founders as the people who are really the best salespeople, or they have somebody on that founding team, like a business partner that can sell, because you need someone to really get the revenue coming in quickly. Um, don't Let me just give you one caution here. Don't be the business owner who's going to go get your business cards made up and get your logos done and your website done and put all this money into the back end of into the business that is not creating income. Focus on making sales early on in your business. Develop a proof of concept. Get the confidence that people will actually pay for whatever it is, a widget or it's a service or a product, doesn't matter. Like, get out there and make some money to see if it works. Don't spend. By the way, I'm talking from experience. I did it the opposite way. I had my banners, I had my logos, I had my business cards, I had my refrigerator magnets. Meanwhile, I hadn't even done a deal yet in real estate, and I'm like, my coach was like, listen, what I had a coach, and that's a huge suggestion as well. Get around a coach or a mentor, and have a group of people around you that are doing the same thing. But be doing the things that are moving the needle in the business. Don't get caught up in the game of playing pretend business owner, where you're kind of like you're cleaning your office every day, and you're like worrying about like buying some equipment. Like, get out there and make some sales, and focus on the things that are going to move the needle in profit.
Yeah, I find a lot of people, let's say, faking it until they make it, but they're actually just doing all the busy work and
Right.
nothing gets done. And you always see them around there, let's say, the business cards and the banners and everything is going around, and they have that image. They're building the image, but it's kind of like building a vision board and just looking at it on the wall every morning and doing nothing about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that's not you got to do the work, right? And focus on the things that are most important in the business. Like, what's really going to generate revenue? What's really going to generate profit? Like, and it starts with revenue. Like, if you don't and this is another thing. I'll see people like, oh, I really want to automate my business and start hiring people. I'm like, cool. Like, so how much you're making yet? Like, what's your deal flow? Like, what are your financials? They're like, oh, well, we haven't like quite started yet, but I just want to be ready for when it does scale that I have all these systems in place. I'm like, dude, you haven't made a single sale yet, and you're worried about creating like a sales force and all of your automate. Like, no, not forget that. Like, get out there and make some sales, and then you'll figure it out. Like, you'll figure out the gaps that you need to fill, and you can worry about that then. And it's not an irresponsible way to run your business, but it's a practical way so that you can actually make sure this thing works before you go spend a ton of time and a ton of money. And one of the reasons people do this, man, is because that's the scary part, doing the actual sales stuff and having to confront the reality of like, maybe I suck at sales, or that people don't want this thing. That's scary, but it's very safe to clean your office, to design your banner. It's fun to make your logo, but that's not really what it's about. And so you got to don't avoid that temptation at all costs.
So, Jason, if anyone wants to get started with Life in Air, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, man. So a couple of things. So we have two events. One's called the Get a Life Getaway, which is where we help people craft their vision for their life in a very tangible way. What their calendar looks like, how much money it takes to accomplish, like what are the action steps to make it a reality. Then we have a business builder workshop where we now will show people how to create a business that they can work in part time and still generate full time income. So an event is a huge way to learn about what we do. If you're not ready for that yet, we have a book. We've sold over 60,000 copies of that. It's just called Life in Air. You can find that on Amazon, or just find us. And by the way, you can see our upcoming events at lifeinair.com, or find us on, I'd say our most commonly used social media platform is Facebook. So we do have a private Facebook group that people can request to join. It's not just for our members and our students, but for anybody who wants to be around other people pursuing, an off the beaten path kind of life, and creating a business that rocks and provides for that life. Like, that's a great place to be, get some support as well.